Can you guys hear me? Yeah? Okay. Excellent. I'm not very familiar up here, so bear with me. I have some notes to keep me on track. I think you'll all appreciate that, so you can get out at a reasonable time and what I say makes sense. Brenda has kindly um, accepted my invitation to sit up here with me, so I'm not all by myself.
My pleasure.
Thank you. So, thank you all for coming this morning and not being scared away when Matt emailed out that I was going to be speaking. I appreciate that. Um, I wanted to kind of begin with a theme as I was thinking about what I wanted to share that kind of rose to the top of thinking through parts of my life that maybe I wanted to open up about and how they intertwined with a message that made sense to share here with all of you. And I kept coming back to the same verse, which was Isaiah 43:2. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you. So I'll try to wrap everything around that message as I go. And it may be a little clunky. I grew up going to a Lutheran church. All right, yes, I love upbeat organ music, sometimes too upbeat, and it's hard to keep up with those hymns, but it's very familiar to me, and it's something that helped shape me as a child. The structure was there, the routine was there. Each Sunday looked very similar. Similar hymns, similar liturgy. It was very routine oriented. And as a child, that was really nice. You knew what to expect, it was predictable, and you just kind of fell into place, and it worked. There wasn't a whole lot of opportunity to ask a lot of questions. There wasn't a lot of critical thinking. At least for a kid, it was just, that's what you did. And it felt like a warm, cozy blanket. You show up and you knew what to expect, and you got that fill each Sunday. I saw the church as a larger family, an extension of my own. I felt very comfortable with the people there. I felt like if I saw them outside of the church setting, they were welcoming me. They were very into whatever was going on with our family or with me. I felt seen, and that was very nice. My idea of church, it rested mostly on the people I knew and my relationship with them, and not so much on my relationship with God. And I think that that's probably pretty normal as a kid. The concept of God can be overwhelming and unknown, but for me, it was very much with the people in the place. As a child, I was a very anxious kid. I found that anxiety made it hard to feel emotions, to feel feelings. It was kind of scary. So you kind of sacrifice feeling happiness and joy because you don't want to feel sadness and anger. So you kind of just avoid all the feelings altogether. And a lot of the times I felt less anxious when I was at church, which is a good thing, especially when I got into adolescence and I was in youth group and I was with friends and people who made me feel like I could be myself and I was loved and I was welcomed. So moving on from that childhood in church into adolescence and youth group, it was all pretty positive experience. When I was a junior in high school, my family, my parents at the time, because my brothers had moved out of the house, made the decision to leave the church. It made sense at the time. There was valid reasons for it, and the rationale was there. But as a 16-year-old who was now kind of like an only child with my brothers out of the house, my family was really at the church. So to leave was incredibly painful. That was a hard experience. In fact, after my parents left, I continued to go by myself until I realized that that wasn't what I wanted either. I didn't want to not be with my parents, but being at that church didn't feel the same anymore. So the interesting part at this point in my life is that my parents chose to start coming here to the First Church of God. And At that time, I did not see this place as where I wanted to be. This was the place my parents had chosen, and it was the alternative to where I wished we still were. So nothing to do with any of you, nothing to do with the building, nothing to do with the First Church of God faith. It was just not somewhere that the teenage me really wanted to be. So I came with my parents, but really kind of disengaged from my relationship with God, my relationship with faith, with a church family. So any of you who were around at that time and thought I was a surly teenager, you're 100% correct. Absolutely was. Then I went off to college. I had the opportunity to attend Alma College. I loved it. It was a great experience for me. And I officially adopted Sundays as my day to sleep in. I no longer made it a priority to go to church or to work on my spiritual health and wellness. Now, upon graduating from Alma in 2010, I felt like, you know what, I've got an education, I've got the energy, I've got a job, so I'm off to take on the world, and I don't need anyone, anything, and I certainly don't need to focus on my faith right now because I've got this. If that doesn't sound naive and unwise, I don't know what does. I did not want anyone's help, and I'm sure my parents are listening and probably laughing because there's no way I was doing this on my own. But I felt like I was because, you know, as humans, we can be pretty stubborn and pretty blind to the realities of life, and I had it. I didn't need anyone's help. I didn't need my faith to guide me. I didn't need my family. Friends were there to make me feel better about myself, but beyond that, I was fine on my own. Clearly, I wasn't. And so I entered into that decade of my 20s that in my time has been marked as a very stressful period. Not because stressful events were happening, but because within me, I was very stressed out. When I was talking with Brenda about what I wanted to say, I referred to it as I lived the most stressful part of my life when I had the least amount of things that I didn't have anything to stress me out, which you don't necessarily feel when you're in that moment. But when you can reflect back as life does add real stressors, you see that maybe you had some wisdom to gain. Maybe you had some life to live. And that was me. If I had admitted at that time in my life that I needed community and I needed God, then I was admitting that I couldn't do it on my own. And that was going against everything. I'd put all my eggs in that basket, that I was independent and I didn't need anyone's help. Vulnerability was not even a word in my vocabulary, and if it was, I was definitely not going to use it. At this point, I started jumping between jobs. I was unable to give myself grace to not be a perfect employee, and that also meant I wasn't very good at giving grace to my coworkers, which makes it hard to work in a job if you can't get along with the people there. So there were a number of jobs around there. For those of you who don't know, my background is in business and accounting, so a lot of numbers-related jobs, which I still like, but I've had to learn how to find peace within myself as well as get along with an office of coworkers. But that comes later. One constant through this decade was my anxiety. I struggled to find any peace. And I started to isolate myself from friends, from my own feelings in myself, and especially from God. And I'd forgotten that in Isaiah, God made it clear He's with us when we're passing through waters, when the rivers are raging, and when there's fire, He's there. And I didn't see it. I didn't see any of it. I didn't see that God moment when my parents started coming here because I was too stubborn to allow myself to feel the feelings of pain when leaving a place that's special to you. I didn't want to feel that, so I couldn't accept the joy that was on the horizon with the church family here. In the summer of 2022, our family moved to Greenville. We'd been residing in Alma prior, and then prior to kids, Alex and I lived in Indiana. And within 2 weeks of moving here, I had a medical emergency And it resulted in a pretty scary experience, including losing consciousness and waking up in the emergency room with about 12 or 15 people, I can't remember, Alex might have a better idea, all working on me. And that was overwhelming. I had to go from there into surgery, and I remember them wheeling me away from Alex, and he looked very scared. He looked incredibly scared, and it was hard for me to see him suffering like that, because while my physical body was struggling and it needed the help of all these medical professionals, my soul knew that God was there. At that moment, I couldn't be stubborn anymore. I couldn't fight it anymore because my body had kind of succumbed to what I was dealing with, and it needed support, and it needed community, and it needed help to keep going. And at that time, what was within me was being supported and kept going by God. So he really was kind of working and planting those seeds all through my 20s, so that when it got to the time when my hand was forced and I couldn't fight it anymore, he was there, and I knew it without question. He was 100% with me and supporting me. I wrote here that in the fear-filled waters that Alex was treading that night, he was with God. And the fire that I was walking through to recover did not consume me. I was not burned because God was working through the many people that surrounded me and helped me. And I realized that I had this community. I just was ignoring them. I was not feeding into the community that was feeding me. And I realized that 15 years ago, when my parents started coming here, that was the God moment that made it, when we moved back to Greenville, an easy decision for my family and me to come here, because you all helped to create this family, this God-filled space that reminds me regularly that he's with us. He's alongside us. Whether we want to see him or not as people, we can make those choices, but he doesn't leave. And since then, my mindset has completely changed, especially around being here. I feel like I can be present. I feel like I can practice my faith, question it, think critically about it, and all those things that as a young person I didn't do because I just followed the routine and walked in the path that was laid out. And now I feel like I get to make that path a little bit more, but I get to do it with the community of people who are there to support and give grace, and who also need the support of the rest of us. And that mutual benefit, I think, is so important. So that's kind of my full circle story around this particular church, which I think it still gets me that it's this church that those life transitions came around to, but maybe that's a larger plan. So I guess I want to close to thank all of you in this church family, and a few of my biological family who didn't get to choose me, for showing me God's love every time we interact. I continue to learn so much from all of you, and I know that God is present here today and every time we gather. So thank you. You all are very special.